So we'll recite the pranam mantras. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Supadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Shri He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptakan Shanagaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpadarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gauravakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hare Krishna devotees. We completed the middle section of the Bhagavad Gita yesterday with chapter 12. And in chapter 12, the Lord has spoken about the 35 different qualities that identifies his devotees. And of that, Shraddha is the most important, faith. When Lord Ram defeats Ravana and comes back to Ayodhya, he invites Vibhishan, the Vanaras, everybody for the coronation ceremony. So at the end of all of the ceremonies, one of the Rakshasas accompanying Vibhishana says, I want to go back to Lanka. How did they all come to Ayodhya? They came on the Pushpaka Viman. So the Pushpaka Viman was so huge that hundreds and hundreds of people from Sri Lanka came over to Ayodhya along with the Lord. So this Rakshasa asks Vibhishana, I want to go back to Lanka, but I'm not sure how I'm going to get back there. How is he going to cross the ocean? So Sri Lanka is 800 miles from Ayodhya. Vibhishan says, oh, very simple. I'll give you something very special. You just hold it in your hands and it will allow you to walk on the water. So the Rakshasa very gladly takes this scroll that was handed to him and he holds it and he walks. And he's amazed. How is he able to walk on the water without being drowned? And out of curiosity, he opens the scroll to see what's in that scroll that is so special that's allowing him to walk on this water. So when he opens the scroll, what does he find? The name of Lord Sri Ram. When he sees the Lord's name on it, this demon thinks And I'm such a powerful person. I've killed so many people. And look at my condition now. Somebody has written a name on a scroll and given it to me. Based on that, I'm crossing the ocean. So I've become so weak and fearful that I need the scroll to help me cross over this ocean. Thinking like this, he decides to let go of the scroll, thinking, no, I cannot be weak like this. I have to do this on my own. So he throws away the scroll and immediately drowns. Faith. So Vibhishan had told him, hold the scroll in your hand and you can walk over water. But the mind is so devious, it thinks, well, this is just nonsense. Why should I rely on a piece of parchment that has the Lord's name and use that to cross the ocean? I'm so strong, I can do it on my own. So one must have faith. And especially one must have faith in the words and instructions of pure devotees. So Vibhishana was not an ordinary person. He was a great devotee of Lord Ram. But unfortunately, this Rakshasa had doubts. So initially, he was successful in walking on the water simply by holding that scroll. But when a little doubt crept in, finished. He drowned. So in chapter 12, Krishna accepts his devotees as being greater than him. Krishna says that his bhaktas are very dear to him. And he values and cherishes his devotees so much, he becomes the charioteer of Arjuna. Yesterday, we were talking about the importance of devotee association and why it's important to go to the temple to get that association. So we'll talk about a pastime of the relevance of devotee association and why it's so powerful. And not having it can completely change who you are. So in the Sri Sampradaya, there's a very famous Acharya called Yamunacharya. He was given that name a little later, but his Karmi name was Alabandar. So he was such a brilliant scholar at a young age, a great Pandit. He could debate any adult and defeat them. But he was a young child, but well versed in the scriptures. So one day, he gets into a debate, and the reward for the debate was half of the kingdom. So as a child, he wins a debate and wins half a kingdom. And because he felt that this responsibility had to be fulfilled, he gives up studying the Shastras and he goes over to become a king as a young child. Now, his grandfather's name was Nada Muni. This Nada Muni was not pleased with the decision of his grandson. He was always feeling separation because his grandson had left, a brilliant scholar, a lot more to study. He had left to take over the kingdom and to provide good governance. So this Nada Muni was on his deathbed, and he calls one of his disciples. His disciple's name is Ram Mishra. And he tells him, bring my grandson back to Krishna consciousness. Saying that, he leaves his body. So the instruction he had given his disciple Ram Mishra is, somehow or the other, go to my grandson, get him connected back to Krishna. So Ram Mishra has to come up with a means by which to bring Yamunacharya or Alabandar back to the Supreme Lord, connect him back to the Supreme Lord. Now he knows he cannot just go into the kingdom and ask for an audience. He may not get an audience. So he has to figure out a way to get that meeting. And he comes up with an idea. So there is one special spinach that is supposed to nourish one's intelligence. So he thinks, I will prepare this dish and take it over, give it to the cook, and they will serve the king this nice spinach. So eventually he teaches the cook how to make this spinach. And every day this spinach was served to the king. And the king loved this spinach very much, this dish very much. So one day, Ram Mishra doesn't go to the kingdom to give this bunch of spinach to the cook. And meantime, the king had become addicted to the spinach. So when that particular day the king was not served the spinach, he asked, where is the spinach? At that time, the courtiers told him, the spinach is actually supplied by this one person who comes every day. He didn't come today. So being intrigued, the king said, Acha, so the next time he comes, can you bring him to me? So of course, Ram Mishra comes back, bringing the spinach, and he gets to meet the king. So when he meets Yamunacharya, he tells him, your grandfather is no more, but he's left a huge treasure for you. And I have come here to tell you that your grandfather insisted that I hand over this treasure to you. So at that time, Yamunacharya was getting ready to wage a war. And he thought, oh, treasure. I can use this treasure to fund my war. So he asks Ram Mishra, okay, bring that treasure to me. Ram Mishra says, this treasure is too heavy, I can't carry it. And this intrigues Yamunacharya even more. Treasure that is so heavy that it cannot be carried. So Ram Mishra says, yeah, I have to take you to that treasure. And Yamunacharya says, okay, chalo, let's go. And Ram Mishra says, no, 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 only you can come by yourself. It's a highly valuable treasure. It's highly secretive. So you cannot bring your entire kingdom with you. You come by yourself. So Yamunacharya thinks, okay, how long is this going to take? So Ram Mishra says, it will take us 3 days to go get the treasure. So they go. So Ram Mishra and Yamunacharya step out. So day 1, As they are getting ready to go to bed, Ram Mishra starts reading the Bhagavad Gita. And as he's reading the Bhagavad Gita, he will come to chapter 12. Chapter 12 is Bhakti Yoga. Hearing these 20 shlokas, Yamunacharya would start crying. He was remembering his childhood life of being engrossed in the scriptures. So day 2 comes. They walk. And at night time, Ram Mishra would read the Bhagavad Gita. And he would come to chapter 12. And in chapter 12, he would come to shloka number 8. And shloka number 8 goes as follows. Mayi eva mana adatsva, mayi buddhim niveshaya, nivashishyasi mayi eva, ata urdhvam na samshayah. This shloka reads, just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus, you will live in me always, without a doubt. Hearing Ram Mishra read this particular shloka, Yamunacharya reacts. He says, what have I done? How my life has completely changed. I don't know where you're taking me and what kind of treasure you're going to give me, but this is the most beautiful treasure, this knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita. I've wasted my life. I don't need whatever treasure that you are taking me to. You have given me the greatest treasure to remind me that I should be performing Bhakti Yoga. But somehow or the other, I took up this responsibility of becoming a king and I forgot to practice Bhakti Yoga. I got caught up in the duties and responsibilities of a king. I left the association of devotees. And the minute I left the association of devotees, I also lost my connection to the Supreme Lord. So Yamunacharya realizes what he had given up and what he had taken over. He had given up spirituality to run a kingdom. And now he decided that treasure he really doesn't want anymore, whatever it is that his grandfather had left him. So he tells Ram Mishra, I'm ready to give up my kingdom. I don't need that treasure. So Ram Mishra says, no. Your grandfather has given me specific instructions that I should personally hand over this treasure to you. That was his last wish. My guru has told me this, and therefore I have to fulfill his instructions. So reluctantly, third day, they arrive. Yamunacharya continues on, although he doesn't really want this treasure anymore, because he feels he's already discovered the treasure of this divine knowledge from the Bhakti Yoga from chapter 12 and what he had actually given up. So finally, they arrive in Sri Rangam. And Ram Mishra takes him in front of the deities of Ranganatha. And he tells him, this is what your grandfather wanted me to give you, which is the Supreme Lord, Ranganatha. Yamunacharya understood what this meant. So he never returns to the kingdom. He divides his kingdom into two. One half goes to the temple in Srirangam, and the other to the caretakers. And he becomes a great Acharya. It's after Yamunacharya that Ramanujacharya comes in terms of disciplic succession. So, having left the association of devotees and becoming engrossed in the importance of running a kingdom, he lost his connection to the Supreme Lord. So, even momentarily, if you leave the association of devotees, you can get carried away. One can get carried away easily. It's just the nature of the mind. Something else will occupy the mind, and before you know it, you've lost contact with Krishna. You've got amnesia again, like Arjuna. You forget everything that you have practiced. This is the precarious position of the Jivatma. Even 1 minute away from Krishna and his devotees, we're done. Because we're so weak. We've been conditioned over so many lifetimes. And Srila Prabhupada says in one of his lectures that devotee association is so powerful that it can forcibly drag you to success. Even if you don't want it, you will be taken to Krishna forcibly. That's the power of devotee association. You will be forcibly dragged to Krishna without your even knowing that it is happening. So, one of the preachers uses actually several preachers use this analogy of the Mumbai trains. The local trains are so crowded that you have to be really talented to get out of the train at your stop because it's so jam-packed. And the process is very simple. You start to make your way towards the door, and then you wait for the rush of people getting out, and along with that rush, you are also dragged out. So you simply rely on the momentum of others moving to move you out of the train and to alight at the right station. So devotee association is like that. They give you the strength that you don't have. They give you the determination maybe that you lack. They are inspiring. Their sadhana inspires you. Their seva inspires you. Their commitment and determination and faith in the Lord inspires you. So we constantly seek inspiration from other devotees. And we learn in their association what to do, what not to do, how to greet each other when we are in the temple, how to say goodbye to each other when we are in the temple. So all of this Vaishnava etiquette can only be learned in the association of devotees, physical association of devotees. Digital association takes you so far, but a lot of Vaishnava etiquette is actually learned in the temple. So for example, yesterday we had His Holiness Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj with us in the temple. What is the proper protocol? The minute you see a sannyasi, you're supposed to offer Dandavats Pranam. And what happens in a temple in a huge hall? You see a few devotees offering their obeisances, and even if you don't know what the protocol is, you just observe others and you follow. So you learn Vaishnava etiquette when you're in the temple. You'll not be able to learn Vaishnava etiquette just by reading books. Another aspect of Vaishnava etiquette. But Vaishnava etiquette you can pick up if you're really observant. You'll notice as the Vaishnavas enter the temple, what do they do first? Do they offer obeisance to the deities or do they offer obeisances to Prabhupada first? Observe closely, you'll find out that when the Vaishnavas enter the temple room, they will go first to Srila Prabhupada and offer obeisances there. Because your connection to Krishna is through the parampara. And how are they offering obeisances? Perpendicular, parallel to the left, or parallel to the right? Again, observe how obeisances are offered. You will pick up a lot of things by coming to the temple, in the ISKCON temple. So all of these subtle things you learn by observation. So this is how you learn Vaishnava etiquette, Vaishnava conduct, do's and don'ts. So the beautiful thing in ISKCON is not many people will tell you what to do and what not to do. A lot of the things you learn simply by observing, which actually used to be very frustrating for me because I thought I could have learned faster if somebody simply conducted a class and said, do this and don't do this. But it takes a long time to learn by observation. Anyway, so, sometimes we are determined in Krishna consciousness and sometimes we lose our enthusiasm and determination. And that is the time when you most need Vaishnavas to help you get through that difficult time that you yourself may be experiencing in your sadhana. So other Vaishnavas are certainly an inspiration for you. And devotee association, our acharyas say, can lead to perfection. So once a group of people were discussing, who's the greatest? So one person stood up and said, the sky is the greatest because it covers everything. Another said, how can the sky be the greatest? Sometimes the cloud covers the sky. Another person said, how can the cloud be the greatest? A little whiff of a wind and the cloud gets dispersed. Somebody else was very intelligent and said, how can the wind be the greatest? The wind gets stopped by mountains. And someone else said, how can the mountain be great? The mountain is held up by the earth. So if the earth was not there, where would the mountain rest? And a theist finally said, how can the earth be great? The earth is actually being held up by the Supreme Lord. So God is the greatest. At that time, the Lord appeared. He said, no, 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 I'm not the greatest. Devotees hold me within their hearts. So how come I am great? Actually, my devotees are great. The devotees possess me. Therefore, they are greater than me. That was actually the essence of chapter 12. That the devotees, through the qualities that they develop through sadhana bhakti, ultimately, they reach a stage of purity that they conquer the Lord. So today's chapter is chapter 13. I must confess that this chapter 13 is going to be a little dry. It's a little, actually this is the most difficult chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. Very technical in nature. So we are actually Going to stick to the slides today as much as possible. And then, if necessary, we'll go into the chapter. So before we begin, let's offer our humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the title of today's chapter is Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga. Chapter 13 to 18 is the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And this last segment of the Bhagavad Gita is called Jnana Yoga. It is also called Sankhya Yoga, because a lot of analytical information is presented by Lord Krishna. So Sankhya means to count. Sankhya also means the discriminatory capacity. So from chapters 13 to 18, specifically chapters 13 to 17, you will see Krishna use a lot of detailed information to talk about how things actually operate. So this begins the Jnana Yoga section. The first 6 chapters we said is all about you, the Jivatma. The middle 6 chapters is all about the Supreme Lord, Paramatma. The final 6 chapters is all about Prakriti. Prakriti depicted as the 3 modes of material nature: Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun. So a lot of shlokas in this last 6 chapters about the 3 gunas and how they influence you. So Krishna has already spoken about this in the earlier chapters, but a lot more technical details will be provided, right? So that's why we said, if you really look at it, Bhagavad Gita would end with chapter 10, 11 shloka. After that, it's just Arjuna asking questions and the Lord responding. It's not that Arjuna does not know these answers. He's asking these questions for the benefit of you and me. So this is what we covered in chapter 12, devotional service, the difference between impersonal worship and personal worship, worshiping the form of the Lord. And then Krishna gives his opinion of what he prefers, which is to always be thinking of him. If you can't do that, the next stage is to practice sadhana bhakti. If you can't practice sadhana bhakti, Krishna says perform karma yoga. If you can't perform karma yoga, then try to perform nishkama karma yoga. If you can't do that, practice jnana yoga. But higher than jnana yoga is dhyana yoga. So Krishna is casting a wide net and saying, all of this you can do, you can connect with me in this way. This is how merciful the Lord is. Although he prefers that you practice bhakti yoga, because in bhakti yoga, he can reciprocate with you. Still, he casts his net very wide to be as inclusive as possible, so that as many jivatmas as possible connect with him in some way or the other. So he's always looking out for you. What is the devotee's disposition through those 35 qualities? That we discussed. The foremost of which is Shraddha, faith. Everything begins with a little bit of faith. So the acronym for today is WISE. It begins with Arjuna's questions again. His questions have to do with 6 topics. And in responding to that, Krishna will talk about the items of knowledge. The items of knowledge are again really the qualities of the devotee. Krishna will come back to distinguish between the soul, the super soul, and Prakriti. And then how do enlightened beings conduct themselves? So what are the wise questions? So this particular chapter begins with Arjuna asking questions. Arjuna vacha prakritim purusham chaiva kshetram kshetrajnam cha etad veditumichhami jnanam jneyam cha keshava. So Arjuna is asking, oh my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, Purusha, and the field, and the knower of the field, and of knowledge, and the object of knowledge. To which the Lord responds, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Idam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetram iti abidhiyate etadyo veti tam prahuhu kshetrajna iti tadvidaha. So let's parse this particular verse. Kshetra, Krishna is saying, Kshetra, my dear Arjuna, is this body that you're occupying. The word kshetra means field. So kshetra is this body that you're occupying. So who's kshetrajna? Kshetrajna is the knower of this body. Who are the two personalities that know this body? The Jivatma and Paramatma. The Jivatma only knows his body. The Paramatma knows everybody's body. What is Prakriti? Prakriti is this material nature. Prakriti includes the three gunas. Who is Purusha? Purusha is Lord Krishna. He is the enjoyer. The word Purusha means someone who enjoys. If you create something, don't you want to enjoy your creation? So after the Lord has created, he wants to enjoy his creation. Therefore, he is known as Purusha. So therefore, the Lord says, I am the only one who accepts all sacrifices and austerities. I am the Yajna Purusha. Yajna is another name for Lord Vishnu. So, Purusha is the enjoyer. What is Jnana? Jnana is the process of acquiring knowledge. And what is this knowledge? The process of acquiring this knowledge, it's that the body and soul and supersoul. So this is actually knowledge. Real knowledge, Krishna says, is about the Atman, Paramatman, and Prakriti. So what is the object of knowledge? Jneyam. Krishna says the object of knowledge is me. The whole purpose of your life is to know me, is to study about me, so you can come back to me. So this is the inconceivable potency of the Lord. So Prakriti is material nature, Purusha is the enjoyer. Jnana is knowledge, Jneyam is the object of knowledge. Kshetra is this body, and Kshetrajna is the knower of the body. So in this regard, the Lord comes back to the topic of the soul and the supersoul. The supersoul is a super knower because he knows all of the bodies that he has created. The supersoul is the supreme proprietor and controller. The supersoul is infallible and always superior to the Jivatma. whereas the Jivatma can only know his own body. But the Jivatma is the secondary proprietor and controller. Because once he occupies a body, he can act, he can take ownership, he can enjoy. So he is the secondary proprietor and controller and enjoyer. But his problem is he doesn't know where the real enjoyment lies. Therefore, he is fallible and subordinate. He doesn't know his real position. And when he doesn't know his real position, he tries to find joy and happiness in all the wrong places where it doesn't exist. The minute the Jivatma realizes that all the joy exists only in a relationship with Krishna, and if he has that light bulb moment, if he does, then he will change his life. His entire life will get transformed. So Krishna then answers the question, what is knowledge? So in response to what is knowledge, Krishna is going to talk about the 20 items of knowledge. So overarching knowledge is about this body, the soul, the super soul, all within the realms of Prakriti. But then when Krishna has to define knowledge, he defines knowledge through these 20 qualities. So let's look at those 20 qualities. So Krishna is again talking about Prakriti, etc. But in shlokas 8 to 12, Krishna is defining knowledge as follows. And please note what is the first element of knowledge? Humility. The more you know and the more you learn from scriptures and the more you learn about who the Supreme Lord is, the more you realize you don't know much and you'll never know enough. So the process of spirituality, when you're chasing degrees in the material world, it leads to pride because you feel, I've conquered something. I've accomplished something. But the beauty of spiritual knowledge is the more knowledge you gain, the more it makes you humble because you realize you are nothing. And as I mentioned in one of the classes, when you get comfortable being insignificant, you will make progress. So Krishna is beginning the definition of knowledge by identifying humility first. Humility, of course, means pridelessness. You don't have pride. So humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master is one of the qualities of knowledge. One of the items of knowledge is you approach a guru. Cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, in the sense as you mature on the path of spirituality, you will become less attached to material things. It's not that you will give it up, you will just use it in the service of Krishna, but you will not become attached to it as if to say, oh, that's mine. Rather, you will take good care of that material object, knowing that it belongs to Krishna. And you will find out ways in which you can use those material objects, including your mind and intelligence, in the service of Krishna. So absence of false ego. No I, me, mine. The perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. Not too many people spend their day or their lifetime thinking about what is this birth and death? Why am I suffering? People just are on autopilot. They just run through life without realizing that they are even suffering. They just think they can conquer everything if they work harder, or they change their tactics, or if they worship this God or that God. They think things will change. They don't ponder the why. They are very busy with the how. If you ponder the why question long and hard, the how is actually secondary. First of all, we need to ask ourselves, why are we doing the things that we do? First of all, why do we get angry? Why do we get stressed? Why do we get anxious? Why do we have expectations of others? You begin with the question why, and don't move from that question until you have answered your own question. So if you've not taken the time to answer the question why, you're too busy caught up in the how, and it's all the wrong house. First, we should focus on answering the question why. Why am I distressed? Why am I depressed? Why am I not having good relationships? Why do I feel like something is missing in my life? So first we need to spend time on the question why. Only then you can make progress, because without having found the answer to why, all of the other what, how, when is meaningless, because you've not answered the question why. Detachment. Freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest. Krishna is not saying give up your family here. He's saying don't become too attached. The subtler message is that another soul comes to associate with you as your child, or as your mother, or as your father, as your husband, as your son, as your wife. But that soul is also a child of Krishna. So in reality, your relationship with that other person is on the basis of the soul, not on the basis of the body. In this body, they may be a male body, but your real relationship with your family members is on the platform of the soul. You are a child of God. They are also a child of God. In that sense, you are eternally related. It's just that when you come into this material cosmos, we all take different bodies. And therefore, based on the body type, our relationship changes. So freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest is understand that everybody is a child of God, including all your family members. That's your original relationship. Universal brotherhood. Even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events. Constant and unalloyed devotion to me. Aspiring to live in a solitary place. When you read the purport, Srila Prabhupada very beautifully explains, what does aspiring to live in a solitary place mean? It simply means to live in the association of devotees. It does not mean to run away into the forest. Because being with devotees, you are in connection with the Supreme Lord. Detachment from the general mass of people, avoiding those who are not interested in Krishna. Accepting the importance of self-realization. And philosophical search for the absolute truth. And Krishna concludes, all these I declare to be knowledge. And besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. So in Krishna's opinion, these 20 items constitute knowledge. Anything else he considers to be in the category of ignorance. So you can go back and meditate on these shlokas, what Krishna really considers to be knowledge. Everything else is just waste of time. So coming back to the slide. So these are the items, 20 items of knowledge. Although the Lord starts with humility, for us as devotees, you don't turn on the switch and acquire humility. You have to do something else. So ananya yogena, constant and unalloyed devotion to me. That's the most important quality for us. The other essential element for a devotee is acharyopasanam, being close to a spiritual master. Upasanam, accepting a bona fide spiritual master. And from that comes all the rest. You'll develop all the other qualities. Amanitvam, adambitvam, pridelessness. Ahimsa, atma vinigraha, aratirjana samshadi. How to achieve these 20 qualities? Krishna will go on. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. If one takes to full Krishna consciousness, all the other mentioned qualities are automatically developed. So the first step is to practice Krishna consciousness. So the segment about the soul and the super soul. Yeyam yat yat pravakshyami yajñatvam ashnute anadimat param brahma nasattanna saduchyate. Here the Lord is saying, I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal. All these sound like riddles. It's not easy to understand these statements. So unless the Acharya explains some of these shlokas to you, it's very difficult to understand. Everything sounds like a very complicated riddle. I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal. Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world, which means the spirit soul is eternal. It has a permanent residence in the spiritual world, but when it leaves the spiritual world, it comes under the influence of Maya Devi. So the spirit soul has no date of birth and has no date of death. It's anadi, means it has always existed. It will continue to exist. As long as the Lord has existed, we also exist. But the thing is, we are subordinate to the Lord. We are also dependent on Him because we are subordinate. But the spirit soul in its original position, in the sense, the Lord is saying the spirit soul doesn't come into being when He creates the universes. It has always existed. Actually, Krishna says, by my glancing over Prakriti, I impregnate the Jivatmas into Prakriti. So Prakriti is considered the womb, and the Lord's glance alone injects all of these Jivatmas into the material cosmos. Bahirantascha bhutanam acharam charamevacha sukshmatvat tada vijñeyam durastham chantikam chantike chatat. The supreme truth exists outside and inside of all living beings. The moving and the non-moving. Because He is subtle, He is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, He is also near to all. So again, one more puzzle, a riddle. The Lord is talking about His role as the Paramatma. As the Paramatma, He pervades everything on the outside. And simultaneously, he is inside everything. This is something we cannot understand. How can I be inside and outside everything simultaneously? This is the inconceivable potency of the Lord in the form of his energy. So Krishna is saying here, I pervade every single atom. So in order to create the material universe, the cosmos, there are three Vishnus who are involved in this process. The first Vishnu, whom we know traditionally as Mahavishnu. That's why we call him Mahavishnu, because he's the first of the three Vishnus. So Mahavishnu is also known as Karanodakashayi Vishnu. So what happens? Karanodakashayi Vishnu enters into the material cosmos, or rather, he lies down on the Karana ocean, and from the pores of his body emerge all of the Brahmandas. So the same Karanodakashayi Vishnu then expands into Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. So Karanodakashayi Vishnu has created all of the Brahmandas simply when he breathes out, all of the pores from his body emanate all of like these bubbles. They are like Brahmandas emanating. And when the Lord breathes in, all of the Brahmandas go back into his body. So this is actually the process of creation. So this Mahavishnu's role is to create the Brahmandas. The same Mahavishnu now has to enter each of the Brahmandas for the purpose of injecting them with Jivatmas. So the same Mahavishnu becomes or expands himself again into what is called the Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. So as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, he enters every single Brahmanda. And a good way to remember this is that he becomes the super soul of every single universe. So every Brahmanda has a Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. It is this Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, from his navel, the lotus comes, and on top of this lotus comes Lord Brahma. So Garbhodakashayi Vishnu has entered all the universes. Every single universe, there is a Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And then in every single universe, this Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, there is a lotus that emanates from his navel, and Lord Brahma comes into being. Now, Brahma's job is to use this raw material energy and convert it into all of the different items that are there in this material universe, both moving and non-moving. Now, in order for both the moving and non-moving to also function, this Garbhodakashayi Vishnu expands into one more Vishnu, the third Vishnu, called Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. It is this Kshirodakashayi Vishnu that we refer to as Paramatma. This Kshirodakashayi Vishnu enters all moving and non-moving entities and pervades every single atom that has been created. So when the Lord says, I am inside and outside, he is inside and outside everything. As Garbhodakashayi Vishnu and Karanodakashayi Vishnu, he is outside. As Paramatma, he is inside. He's pervading everything. in the universe. So within the Jivatma is the Paramatma. So can you imagine how subtle the Lord is? We know that the soul is 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. Inside that soul enters the super soul. Can you imagine how subtle the Lord is as Kshirodakashaya Vishnu? There is another significance to this sentence. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. Physically, the Lord is far away from you. Physically, the Lord is also near to you. How? When the Lord is residing within you as Paramatma, if you turn towards him, you are close to him. If you've never acknowledged him, he is far away from you. So we began this section 6 by saying, the middle section by saying, the Lord is waiting for you to acknowledge him and invite him to be part of your life. If you've not acknowledged him and if you've not invited him, he's very far, far away. How is he far away? He is just a neutral witness. He's just quietly witnessing what you're doing. He's sanctioning your desires. That's all. But the minute you turn towards him, he becomes involved in your life. So that is what this means. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. Near to all, he is residing within you as Paramatma. But deeper meaning is, if you acknowledge him and establish a relationship with him, then you have a meaningful relationship with the Supreme Lord. So the super soul is all pervading. The super soul has hands, legs, eyes, ears, heads, and faces everywhere. There's nothing that you can do that the Lord doesn't know. You just cannot escape the Lord. All reconciling. He's both outside and inside everything. The Lord does not have material senses. The Lord's body and the soul are non-different, the super soul. They are the source of senses of all of the living entities. The Lord is undivided and he is residing in all our hearts. So who can know about the soul and super soul? Iti kshetram tata jnanam gyeyam choktam samasatah madbhakta etad vijnanya madbhavapapapadyate. So the Lord is saying, thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Who can know all of this? Madbhakta. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. So Krishna is saying this knowledge is not easy to understand for those who have not approached him, do not have a relationship with him. Madbhakta. So now we're going to come to the last section, which is who is actually the real enjoyer? Is it a Jivatma or is it Paramatma? So the qualities of Jiva, the qualities of material nature, the qualities of the super soul. Who is the realized Jiva? How does this realized Jiva attain Jnana Chakshu, divine vision? And what is their destination? So the qualities of the Jiva, the Lord says, the Jiva has always existed. But the problem is they struggle for an existence here in the material cosmos because they are trying to enjoy independently of the Supreme Lord. So this Prakriti is designed to frustrate you. It's deliberately designed to frustrate you so that you begin to ask the why questions. And until you've got the answers to the why questions, you will continue to pursue the knowledge that is required to answer those why questions. So our wardrobe to choose from is 8.4 million different types of outfits. And that's going to be based on your prior activities, karma, and also your desire. But what about the qualities of Prakriti, nature? It is also beginningless, but then it comes into being and it is manifested for a period of time and then goes back into the Lord's body. And when the Lord is ready to create again, all of Prakriti comes out again. This Prakriti becomes the residential quarters for the Jivatmas who have disobeyed the Lord. So, and this Prakriti is so powerful, even though the Jivatma is a superior energy of the Lord, and Prakriti is considered the inferior energy of the Lord, still the Jivatma comes under the control of the three gunas. So Krishna is saying only he is the enjoyer, he is the proprietor, he is the witness, and he permits you activities or he rejects your desires. So ultimately the Lord is involved in everything. So you would recall this similar slide from a previous chapter. The soul has a desire, the super soul sanctions, the nature executes, and based on that you get the type of body. So what is your desire plus what is it your karma tank? What is it that the Lord is sanctioning? And then nature decides what is the next body that you should take. So both your desires and your prior activities determine your next body type. But if you practice Krishna consciousness, but you're not successful, you're guaranteed a human birth again. Otherwise, there's no guarantee. So what happens when the Jivatma acquires this 20 qualities or focuses on these 20 items of knowledge? They begin to distinguish between body and matter, spirit soul and the body. They see that the Paramatma is actually their companion. And yet they are the non-doer. So how do you get this jnana chakshu, this divine knowledge? Yavat sanjayate kinchit sattvam sthavara jangamam kshetra kshetrajna samyogat tadvidhi bharatarshabha. O chief of the Bharatas, know that whatever you see in existence, both the moving and the non-moving, is only a combination of the field of activities and the knower of the fields. So Krishna is saying everything that you're experiencing is actually because of a combination of things, your interaction with material nature. So material nature by itself is considered inert. Until the spirit soul comes and acts on it, material nature is inert, it is neutral. So it's the jivatmas in whichever bodies that they are occupying, they tend to act on nature. They exploit nature for their own enjoyment. So how do you attain this jnana chakshu? By gaining knowledge about the constituents of the body, that there is a difference between the body and the soul. And ultimately you see that every spirit soul belongs to Lord Krishna. And therefore you have samadarshinaha. You see everybody with equal eyes. And when you come to this platform, you have greater control over your mind and senses. So what's the destination for somebody who's achieved this jnana chakshu? Kshetra kshetrajnayorevam antaram jnana chakshusha bhuta prakritir moksham cha ye viduryanti te param. Those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body, and can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in material nature, attain to the supreme goal. So everything begins by knowing that you are not this body. The next step is, if you're not this body, who are you? I am the spirit soul. The next step is, if you are the spirit soul, what is your duty and responsibility? Your duty and responsibility is to serve. Serve whom? The Supreme Lord. So it's a logical progression of an elevation in consciousness. So this is a summary of this particular chapter. I know it doesn't feel like we've covered much, or whatever we've covered seems a little bit confusing. So let's go to the single word summaries. So we said that the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita constitute Prakriti or material nature. In reality, chapter 18 is actually a detailed summary of the 17 chapters. In the same sequence in which the Lord has already spoken the first 17 chapters, in that same sequence, the Lord will very quickly summarize everything that he has said. So technically speaking, then you could say Bhagavad Gita ends with chapter 17. Why do we need chapter 18 at all? Because just repeat. The Lord knows that Jivatma has to hear the same thing again and again. Maybe one day, 1 or 2 things will go inside the mind. And they'll come back here a little bit more, and then another 2, 3 things will go in the mind. You see, throughout the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord repeats himself again and again and again. Because our memory power is very poor. Our intelligence is questionable. So the Lord repeats everything again and again and again. So the 20 qualities, or the items of knowledge that you saw, some of that already is there in that 35 qualities of the devotees. But the Lord is emphasizing what is important. Anything that is important is worth repeating. And that's what the Lord is doing. He's repeating critical points for Arjuna to consider again and again. So, Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga. The chapter is translated by Srila Prabhupada as nature, the enjoyer, and consciousness. So you see, we have entered into this prison. So let us say in the middle section, we said it was the interview by the candidate. So the candidate has got all the answers that he needs, that he or she needs. And he's decided, yes, I like this boss very much. I want to work for him. And he accepts Krishna's job offer in chapter 3. Work for me. Please me first. I should be your top priority. But there's a problem. He would love to work for Krishna. But how do you work for Krishna while you are occupying this jail? This body is a jail, and this cosmos is also a jail. But you see, the Lord is so merciful. Even though he has sent you to jail for your disobedience, he has never abandoned you. He has come with you into the jail in the form of Paramatma. You think that happens in the material world? You think anybody from the government is always constantly with you, guiding you from within? Of course, the jail may have a superintendent here. But the Lord is personally within us as Paramatma. So how do you get out of this jail? You need the help of an attorney, somebody who understands the laws of the land, can help you get a lighter sentence, or better yet, to get parole. to permanently exit the jail or to reduce your sentence. So for that, you need somebody who's knowledgeable about the laws of the land and a very, very outstanding attorney. You see the Lord's role. He has created this jail. He's created the laws and regulations, and he's also coming as your attorney. So the Lord is saying, I'm with you all the time. If you want to get out of this jail, you can get out anytime you want. But you need to approach me and ask for help. So this is that I'm far, far away and yet near. So he's near to those devotees who acknowledge him as Paramatma within. The Lord says, if you only would allow me to help you, I'll help you. But you're so stubborn, you think you can do it on your own. That's the problem with the Jivatmas. So we pray to God only when we are in trouble. Otherwise, we don't want him in our life. But the Lord, that is why the Lord says, Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam. He is the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, not just few, all. But you have to act from your side. So, as Paramatma, the Lord says he is ready to guide you to the right path so that you can answer that one single question. Why am I suffering? Once you've understood the answer to that question of why you are suffering, then you can move to how do I alleviate this suffering, which is by practicing sadhana bhakti. But if you don't even know that you're suffering, you will not really approach the Supreme Lord. Or worse, if you think you're actually enjoying yourself very much because you've got all the wealth and intelligence and all of the needs are being met, then definitely you're not even thinking about suffering at all. You actually think you're enjoying. And Krishna says that's far more foolish to think you're enjoying yourself, that you have a very nice life and everything is going fantastic. Simply because materially you're doing well. So Krishna is ready to assist us as an attorney if we acknowledge his presence as Paramatma within. He can help you get out of this jail. So what is this jail is what we're going to cover tomorrow in chapter 14. What is this jail? This jail is the three gunas. The three gunas are the three prison bars on this jail cell. So Krishna is going to tell you, how can you break free of these three bars? So as an attorney, he's going to guide you tomorrow how to exit this prison once and for all. So as I mentioned, chapter 13 is a little bit difficult to understand. Essentially, how do you analyze the universe? How do you analyze the nature of self and the nature of God? So again, coming back to the three topics, Jivatma, Paramatma, Prakriti. What's the most important thing to understand about these three facets is technically what is covered in chapter 13. There are far more technical elements that I don't want to get into because it will create too much confusion. All you need to understand is, in this chapter, the Lord is simply saying how inconceivable he is. It's difficult for us to understand him. And one day, Srila Prabhupada was with two of his disciples. Madhudvisha Prabhu and Jamuna Mataji. And these two disciples of Prabhupada were talking among themselves about Are Krishna and Balaram one and the same? So Madhudesha Prabhu was telling Jamuna Mataji they are different because Lord Krishna has Radharani and Lord Balaram does not. Therefore, they cannot be one and the same. Whereas Jamuna Mataji was saying they are one and the same because Balaram actually originates from Krishna. Balaram is the first expansion of Krishna. So there seems to be a contradiction. They are one and the same, but at the same time, they're different. How are they same and how are they different? This is the inconceivable potency of the Lord. So with the limits of our intelligence and the limitations of our mind, logic cannot actually help us get there. So they approach Srila Prabhupada and want him to resolve the matter that the two of them had been going back and forth about. So they approach Prabhupada and they tell Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I think Krishna and Balaram are different. And Prabhupada says, yes, you're right. And Jamuna Mataji says, but Prabhupada, they are one and the same. And Prabhupada says, yes, you're right. So now Prabhupada has said both of them are right. Krishna and Balaram are different. Krishna and Balaram are one and the same. How do you understand this complicated topic? How can two entities be the same and different simultaneously? This is called achintya, inconceivable. And actually, the Gaudiya Madhva Sampradaya philosophy is based on this tattva called the achintya beda abheda tattva, that which is simultaneously one and different, and therefore it is inconceivable. It's very hard for our mind to wrap around this particular concept. How are Lord Krishna and Balaram the same? They are the same because Krishna is the source of Lord Balaram. In that sense, they are the same. So Lord Balaram is the first expansion of Lord Krishna. But they're also different. So how are they different? So Lord Balaram is known as the Sevak Bhagavan. And Lord Krishna is known as the Sevya Bhagavan. What's the difference in the two? Sevak Bhagavan. Lord Balaram's role is to serve Krishna exclusively. Lord Krishna's role is to accept that service, and therefore he is Sevya Bhagavan. So one is a Sevak, and the Sevak is serving Lord Krishna. So Lord Krishna plays both roles. He accepts the service, and that is why Lord Balaram is known as Adi Guru. He is teaching us how to serve the Supreme Lord. So the Lord himself expands himself into Balaram to show us what is the mode of service. So Lord Balaram's only duty is to serve Lord Krishna. Sometimes when the Lord enters the material universe, Balaram plays the older brother, and sometimes he plays the younger brother of the Lord. So that's the difference between Krishna and Balaram. They are one and the same, but at the same time they're different. One is the Sevya Bhagavan, the other is the Sevak Bhagavan. Therefore, when Prabhupada answered the question to both Madhudesha Prabhu and Jamuna Mataji, he said, yes, both of you are right. Yes, Balaram does not have Radharani. But yes, at the same time, Krishna and Balaram are the same because Balaram is an expansion of Krishna. So how do we understand this and how do we cleanse our consciousness? So there's a nice pastime in relation to this. It's the bucket story. One day a guru asks his disciple, go get me some water. And the guru hands him a basket. The basket is quite dirty. And unfortunately, the basket has a lot of holes in it. But the disciple, being very obedient, follows the instructions of his guru. He goes to the river to fetch a water in that particular bucket. And by the time he would come to his guru, the bucket would be empty. There would be no water in it. And the guru, seeing the bucket with no water, he would send his disciple back again to the river. No, try again. Go back, get some water. So this went on 2-3 times. Finally, the disciple was a little bit puzzled. How can I get you water? There are holes in this bucket. No. So the disciple becomes a little frustrated and asks this question. Guru says, relax. I just wanted the bucket to be clean. Now, of course, you can think, oh, this is a little bit of a difficult story to swallow. But there is a deeper significance here. One is our willingness to follow the instructions of our guru, even though on the face of it, it may not appear to be something logical. So if we follow the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and don't question it in the beginning, even though you may be very skeptical, even though you may have doubts, we just talked about faith, right? But if you have faith in Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, then your consciousness will get cleansed. Now, you don't know the process, the technicalities on how it is getting cleansed, but your consciousness is getting cleansed. So when you practice Bhakti Yoga and you're determined and dedicated and ready to do it with utmost faith, because it's actually going to benefit you, then your consciousness will be cleansed and elevated at the same time. Similarly, when we read this 13th chapter, you may think, my God, what a complicated, the shlokas are complicated, everything seems like a riddle, I can't understand a thing. So initially, when you read the Bhagavad Gita, you feel like giving up because you can't understand anything. It's not easy to read the shlokas and not easy to understand the purpose also. I experienced that when I remember when I came into Krishna consciousness and I was chanting. I like to chant, and therefore I was chanting nicely. And I would visit the temple every weekend and honor prasadam along with devotees. But I could never read the Bhagavad Gita. Every time I would open the Gita and start reading, I would think this is like a big puzzle piece. I mean, it is English, but I don't understand this English. It's just not making sense to me. So after reading 2 pages, I would just put it down because I would get frustrated because I couldn't understand what Lord Krishna was saying, and I couldn't understand what Prabhupada was saying in his purport. So one day I had taken some vacation, and I promised myself, I had gone to my sister's place in Udaipur, and I promised myself I will take my Bhagavad Gita with me. Since I was going to be there for 10 days, I will read a couple of chapters every day, make my notes, whether I understand it or not, I'm going to read the entire Bhagavad Gita. So I did. I can't say I understood anything, but I made notes. I still have the notes that I made from the very first time I read the Bhagavad Gita, every single chapter over those 10 days that I was there in Udaipur. But the trick is that you have to hear more. The more you hear from Vaishnavas and pure devotees, from the lips of pure devotees specifically, the more light bulbs will go off. So each time you attend these classes, Maybe you take away 1% or less than 1%, makes sense to you. But you keep attending classes and you stick to your sadhana routine. A lot of the questions that you have and doubts that you have, what you read, what does it really mean, gets answered. And something mystical happened yesterday when I was in the temple. There's one particular shloka that I had a big challenge with. Although on the face of it, I understood what Prabhupada was saying in the purport, still the explanation to me internally was not satisfying. I always felt something was missing. And I've listened to other preachers in ISKCON describe this one particular shloka and the purport, and still I felt that something was missing. It's that light bulb was not going off. Logically, I understood what was being said. But somewhere it was difficult for me to comprehend. I felt something was missing. So, and I will show you that shloka, just to tell you what happened yesterday in the temple. This is the shloka I've had problems with for the last, I would say, 2.5 years, because I was never happy with the explanations provided. So in the back of my mind, every time I would come across the shloka, I would think, what is this? I'm not able to really understand it. And therefore I felt when I was covering the shloka and I'm teaching this particular shloka, I was not being very effective because I felt like there's a missing element here. This particular shloka is in chapter 3. Dhumena vriyate vannihi yatha darsho malena cha yatolbena vrito garbha tatha te nedamavritam. Again, this shloka is like a big puzzle. Krishna is telling Arjuna in the context of lust, and he's talking about 3 degrees of lust. And he's using analogies to explain these 3 degrees of lust. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of lust. And if you read the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, compares this to fire covered by smoke is a Jivatma. Mirror covered by dust is you're in an animal body. Embryo covered by the womb, you're occupying the body of a tree. But in this particular purport, this Prabhupada says this stage is like the beginning of Krishna consciousness. The dust on the mirror refers to a cleansing process of the mirror of the mind by so many spiritual methods. The embryo covered by the womb is an analogy illustrating a helpless position. For the child in the womb is so helpless that he cannot even move. This stage of the living condition can be compared to that of the trees. The trees are also living entities, but they have been put in such a condition of life by such a great exhibition of lust that they are almost void of all consciousness. The covered mirror is compared to the birds and beasts, and the smoke-covered fire is compared to the human being. And no matter how many times I've read this purport and other lectures that I've listened to, I was not at all satisfied. Yesterday, His Holiness Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj covered this particular shloka in detail, and the missing elements that was troubling me was answered. So Maharaj took an explanation of 5 different types of consciousness described by Bhaktivinoda Thakur Swami Srila Prabhupada and used that to explain this particular shloka. I was thrilled to be sitting there and everything was falling into place. So my point is, sometimes you will not get the answers right away. You will not get the understanding right away. But that doesn't mean you give up and walk away from the Bhagavad Gita. It is not an easy book to read. but you will get the answer for sure. Krishna will make sure you'll get the answer. Whatever you read and doesn't make sense to you, somewhere or the other you'll get the answer. I promise you. You listen to a Vaishnava lecture and suddenly you'll get the answer. You'll be listening to Prabhupada's lecture, suddenly you'll get the answer. Out of the blue, you'll get the answer. This is the cleansing process. And when you start getting these small, small answers and your small, small doubts get clarified, it increases your faith in the process. So this is how transformation is taking place on a very subtle level. So externally, it may not be apparent to you, but transformation is happening. You have to have faith in the process, though. So for Krishna, persistence is important. You cannot give up. You know, like we said in the Samudra Manthan, if the demigods decided they didn't want to follow Krishna's instructions, Krishna said, whatever happens, don't give up the churning. That was his instruction to them, to the demigods. You may see things, you may want to give up, but don't give up. And what's the first thing that comes out? Poison. And so much poison was coming out, the demigods could have said, well, wait a minute, what is this? Why am I working so hard just so that poison can come out? So when you are following this process, you have to, there's a little bit of struggle involved. That struggle is the process of eliminating the poison from your consciousness until you can begin to taste the nectar here and there. You'll get bits of nectar here and there. And that gives you faith to continue with the process. So, but the first thing is that you have to be dhridavrata, determined. Krishna uses the word dhridavrata in chapter 2. So that kind of determination we need to have. Then we can make progress. So we'll stop the class here today. Vancha kalpadarupyascha kripasindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrindi ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol.